Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be going over the autobiography of Mahatma Gandhi. We're going to go into some of his beliefs that he wrote about, his journey from start until, I guess, the finish of his biography, because obviously he did not write about his own death. It's hard to, come back and then do that later. There's a lot of spiritual elements that were encouraged outside of Hinduism, which I thought were really interesting, so I hope you join me on this journey. Now, unfortunately, I have a cat on my lap, so I couldn't get the rest of the book, these pages. This is the autobiography I have. The cover is, less durable than the pages of the book itself. I got this at Life Path Ministries for, a quarter. Worth every penny. But this guy was interesting, and he came up, at least in my history of study, a couple times. Obviously, Gandhi is not a Christian, at least not in the fundamental sense. But one of the really interesting things I thought about this character was he did not start studying his own belief seriously until he was approached by fundamental Christians. And that was also the thing that turned him away from Christianity. It was the idea that you have to be in this box, otherwise you do not follow Christ. At the time, he was like, I don't even know my own faith per se so well, so I'm going to take a while to study it. But then he read Thus Spake Zarathustra by Nietzsche. He read The Kingdom of God is Inside You by Tolstoy. He read, he was a well-read guy, and he actually started out as a lawyer. I had no idea. He was married at age 13, and he had, 3 or 4 kids. He spent a lot of his time traveling, and this book is actually called His Experiments with Truth, and he even says it on, the last pages of it. I'm not quite done with it. I have, 30 more pages to go, but this book is compact, dude. Just dropped my bookmark. It is, efficient, just like him. He tried to live a life of, very little means and very little expense. He was also a firm believer in Hamza, something like that. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Something about words you see in books occasionally where they sound different in your head than when you say them out loud. Like my daughter said the word subtle the other day, and it was just the cutest thing, because I know she's read it a couple hundred times, but never actually said it out loud. So that's the belief that all life is sacred. So you cannot eat meat, and hopefully not eggs even. And he even tried to get away from drinking milk, and he did for a very long time, because having a diet was part of his experiment with truth. The thing about Gandhi that I really like is he saw issue, and he meant to fix it. And one of his philosophies was with your internal purity, you will see things wrong in the outside world and also desire to fix them. The external purity will follow your internal purity as well. That's kind of interesting. That also follows the hero story, at least as far as I can tell. If you see a problem in yourself, you get used to fixing those first, and then when you see a problem that immediately needs addressed outside, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. To my horror today, I literally saw a video in St. Louis at least it said it was in St. Louis, of one African-American gentleman, literally pulling out his gun, loading it very slowly, and then shooting a homeless guy in the head. And then the people recording it, because that's how you see these things, you see people just recording it, run away, say, OMG, he killed him. And one of the shames, I think, in our culture these days is because we are encouraged to be spectators, because it's safe to be in the herd, heroes are just not being made. Because if you have passion about something, people will just say you're overreacting. Because passion is emotional, and it's more in the feminine realm, at least as far as I can tell. Whereas it has potential to be uncontrolled or uncontrollable. But there is such a thing as righteous anger. You need to know what to be angry about, because anger all the time is an appeal to justice, all the time. It just depends where your compass for justice is. So I'm going to go over a couple things in this book that he said that I thought was extremely profound. Because we can always learn something even if they don't align with your faith or ideals. This person was quite accomplished and righted a lot of injustices he saw in the government itself, or in the governmental practices, especially in South Africa, where racism and classism was just rampant all over the place. One thing he posits here is a certain aim. I worship God as truth only. I have not yet found him, but I am seeking after him. And that's almost like an eternal mantra that we can all have. And he had it too. This is called his experiments with truth. So one of the vows he took was obviously not to harm animals, not to eat them. So he mostly lived on like fruits and nuts his entire life. So for him, fasting was a big deal because to recover from a fast, like a long fast where you just drink a lot of water, you get food back slowly, and your body really needs fats specifically and protein. And that mainly comes from meat. And so to maintain this lifestyle, which he actually advocated for up into his death, like this guy was willing to die or have his family members also perish because they wish to be under that same kind of guideline. He lived out the ideal that there are some things that are more important than your life, some ideas and principles that are worth your life even. And that's noble. The idea is noble. That depends what you're striving for. Obviously, if I were to give my life for my phone, well, perhaps that's not quite noble, but maybe give my life for the ability for everybody to communicate, not just myself. Well, that's beyond the object. And that could save a lot of lives. It means one person's life is sacrificed based on, you calling an ambulance and getting help. So something like that. So he based a lot of his beliefs and his aims and his own personal discipline on the idea of something that was transcendent. And that's a starting point as far as I could tell. One of the things I'll caution you against, well, maybe not, is looking up, just due to the flavor of the culture, looking up things about this man on the internet and taking all offenses against him willy-nilly and just as gospel truth, as if Wikipedia somehow always tells the truth all the time, unedited. Be careful with what you hear about one person writing about somebody else, unless it's, like, authentically there. Read about books that were posted, like, during that time. Like, I read this one article when I was looking up to see how he died, because it's obvious, again, it's not in this book, and it said he's racist, he didn't try to help the lower class, the untouchables, and that's obviously false in this book. One of the things he tells about, because India has a caste system, there's 3 different castes, the untouchables are like the lowest caste, and so they were having a plague outbreak. He dealt with like 3 of these in his lifetime, which is just astronomical, the fact that he's still alive and he dealt with all this stuff. The people who were the most hygienic were actually the lowest class. Even though they only had like mud huts and stuff, they kept their stuff clean. The higher class was actually the ones that they were almost under like the sickness of affluence. They would just throw their waste in the corner, just dump it out on the street, stuff like that. And their hygienics were just terrible. And every time he would go to different areas, he would not only want to fix and clean, but teach people how to clean. Like every time he went to a different area, he established schools to educate. If anything, basic arithmetic, basic reading, and basic hygienics. Those are like his top 3. He would try to pitch his experiment in vegetarianism, but that wasn't as important as the other ones. And it's really neat to see his lifestyle, because he was a person involved in politics quite often. He even says in here that religion and politics are not separate. If you think they are, then you have no idea what religion is. But he didn't do things for money, per se. He thought he lived fine. He tried to live as simply as humanly possible and do everything that he could do himself and not worry about material stuff. So if you have somebody like that who's legitimately trying to help out humanity, that is someone that's worthy of praise and honor. So his aim was different. He wasn't trying to get shareholders. He wasn't trying to appease Pfizer. He wasn't trying to do anything else besides make things better quality that we know are like tried and true as far as quality goes. Obviously, hygiene. One of the biggest regrets he says he has in his life is not being able to give a formal education to his family, though he did teach them proper etiquette, technique, the worth of life itself. He was highly educated and read constantly, but beyond that, like the basic education, he was not able to give that to his family, especially his wife. Because they were moving constantly, he didn't want them to be brought up under foreign education, because he understood the idea of indoctrination even from the affluent class like the English. So he wanted his family to be brought up rather to a point of high etiquette as far as morality goes, than to know more advanced math, be like a doctor, or even be able to read and write quickly. One could argue that's like probably a better bet as far as when people are interacting with each other. Do they care how smart you are, or how much respect you give them? How much dignity you give another person? So I think he chose the higher value out of the two, and that's obviously what he thought as well. I did manage to get myself a copy of the Vedas and the Gita, and he quotes a good bit of that in there, and one of the things he does encourage me to do, at least, is to again, my desire is to find the commonality in every religion, not necessarily saying that they're equal, but there's got to be something in the transcendent element that calls out to people to follow a certain kind of lifestyle. And there are things you can learn from other lifestyles, like the Pharisees, for example, in the biblical times. They were by far some of the more righteous people that ever existed. They put laws on themselves that prevented them from sinning. That is something admirable, but when you hold only to the laws to get yourself saved, well, that's a religion of works. And a lot of religions are a religion of works, as if you can work so hard, heaven has to let you in because you say so. As if your individual divinity will just kind of make you go somewhere. But we know we're not that. So he quotes the Gita in here in the Vedas, obviously, just knowing, because he eventually, once his palate was whetted by the Christians, he was encouraged to seek out his own belief and continue to read and continue to study. So I have the Vedas and the Gita back there. And here's one of the stanzas he quotes. If one ponders an object of sense, there springs attraction. From attraction grows desire. Desire flames to fierce passion. Passion breeds recklessness. And then the memory, all betrayed, lets noble purpose go and saps the mind, till purpose, mind, and man are all undone. So I think that whole stanza there talks to the idea of just like going toward a feeling, your senses that we are able to perceive the outside world with, instead of stepping back and thinking about what your senses, the cumulative sense of all of your senses, give you, which is like allegory, which is, gaining meaning, looking at yourself from like a third person perspective. He's saying do that rather than go and focus on the individual sense, maybe the gratification, maybe the hunger, maybe whatever it is. Because when you focus on that, man becomes undone. And that's true. As far as I can tell, it's true. If you focus on how hungry you are or how tired you are, instead of telling yourself, I am tired, I need to be better than that. Stepping back outside of that realm and trying to act your proper character, that you want to be consistent regardless about, much indigestion you might have or something like that. I think that's worthy of doing. That is how you make a character. A character transcends his urges. Infinite striving after perfection is one's right. It is its own reward. The rest is in the hands of God. And that's echoed in the Psalms. Man makes his plans, but God guides his steps. And he even attributes to that here. He would like to settle down and see a lot of his projects through in his life. But God had other plans for him, and he'll get like a telegram from somewhere else in Gandhi would have to get up and move. And wherever he sat down, or settled down for a minute, he would try to make the world around him quite better, as much as he could. And for those of you that are apologists and listening to this, here's what you don't say to somebody who's not a Christian. This was said to him by one of the Plymouth Brethren, who confronted him with an argument for which he was not prepared. You cannot understand the beauty of our religion. From what you say, it appears that you must be brooding over your transgressions every moment of your life, always mending them and atoning for them. How can this ceaseless cycle of action bring you redemption? You can never have peace. You admit that we are all sinners. Now look at the perfection of our belief. Our attempts at improvement and atonement are futile, and yet redemption we must have. How can we bear the burden of sin? We can but throw it on Jesus. He is the only sinless Son of God. It is his word that those who believe in him shall have everlasting life. Therein lies God's infinite mercy. And as we believe in the atonement of Jesus, our own sins do not bind us. Sin we must. It is impossible to live in a world sinless. And therefore Jesus suffered and atoned for all the sins of mankind. Only he who accepts his great redemption can have eternal peace. Think what a life of restlessness is yours, what a promise of peace we have. This argument utterly failed to convince me. I humbly replied, if this be the Christianity acknowledged by all Christians, I cannot accept it. I do not seek redemption from the consequences of my sin. I seek to be redeemed from sin itself, rather from the very thought of sin. Till I have attained that end, I shall be content to be restless. Like, that's one thing you don't tell to somebody who you're just meeting, or that you want to convert. You don't even give them the benefit of understanding, especially when Christ says, we should be known by our love for one another. That is supposedly in the context of the Christian realm. But additionally, to those who do not believe, love should be very evident on the way we talk and speak. And if it's not, and we're just rejecting, we should check ourselves. He said things like, Philosophically, there was nothing extraordinary in Christian principles. But he also said, what was the meaning of saying that the Vedas were the inspired word of God? If they were inspired, why not also the Bible and the Quran? Thus I took a path my Christian friends had not intended for me. I have remained forever indebted to them for the religious quest they have awakened in me. I shall always cherish the memory of their contact. The years that followed had more, not less, of such sweet and sacred contacts in store for me. I think that goes directly in line with the Great Commission, and that's at the end of the Gospels. Preach salvation to the nations via that Jesus came, the transcendent came down united with flesh and shared in our death that we might share in the life after. If you want to look at it as the mathematical equation, because the transcendent came down and did this and lived after, therefore we can die and live after as well. He felt that God could be only realized through service. I think there's something to that. Not necessarily works itself, but devoting yourself to others. Living outside of the danger brooding on the inside. And trying to make reality a better place than, when you got there than when you left. And that's Adam's first command, is to be fruitful. Multiply comes next, obviously, but be fruitful, make the world better. That'll give you something to do. One of the convictions that Gandhi always had was whenever he wanted to see something or defend a certain case, he wanted to be there. Or whenever he was going to give a response, he would like to travel there in person. And he says it right here, and I think it's kind of true. Things heard from a distance appear bigger than they are. Especially if your reputation and your name echo with an experience and other people follow your line of thinking. It's like your voice is not just your voice, it's like 1,000 other people's voices. And if it's heard shouted from the mountaintops 1,000 miles away instead of spoken directly by an individual man right in front of you, that makes perfect sense. That's like a realm that's beyond mine, because right now I love engaging in, personal one-on-one dialogue, if I can. I at least for myself, and you can think differently about yourself, but I truly think, and I've been told this, that my strength is more in conversation. That's why when I go with these for a while, I could probably go on for an hour or two. I choose not to, and I don't think I have to. A lot of the things that I've discovered myself, I like to pass on in conversational form. So when I try to link things together, these videos might be edited, and I'll cut up some pauses here and there, but I want it to be sort of off the cuff, at least maybe off the top of my head. The way I feel about knowledge itself is if you don't know enough about it to talk about it and you have to read off a script, maybe you don't know it enough yet. I think that makes sense. And he has a lot of fortune cookie lines in here. This is one of them. My experience has shown me that we win justice quickest by rendering justice to the other party. So if you see what issues they have and you attempt understanding, you attempt relationship, and you try to take care of their grievances, they might not be as big as you think they are if there's two parties that are disagreeing. Then oftentimes they'll see your authenticity and they will want to reciprocate that. It's oftentimes not relationship, but the lack thereof, the inability to communicate and talk to each other. That's what leads to, especially issues in the legal front, as far as I can tell. It is idle to adjudicate upon the right and wrong of incidents that have already happened. It is useful to understand them, and if possible, to learn a lesson from them for the future. I think that's right. That's the dwelling and brooding on sin, or the unforgiveness of your imperfection, something like that. So always journey forward, always have that eternal aim. Earlier he talked in here about if you are working in service for others, it has no meaning unless you have pleasure in it. That means unless you know you're doing it for something greater, like your reason and your aim is something greater, the act itself will lose meaning. At least legitimate meaning. It might be a means to an end, but then you're still going to have some bitterness against the means because you'd rather just not be there. You work for the end, but the work is where you have to put yourself. This is something I can understand. Every day I realize more and more that it is like walking on a sword's edge. I see every moment the necessity for eternal vigilance. At that time, he's talking about sexual celibacy, even from his wife. He's trying to wean himself from that because he doesn't like the concept of being a slave to his urges. He's married when he was 13. He was allowed to do whatever roughly, with his wife that he wanted to. For me, on the carnivore diet, at least I try to most of the time. I do cheat. That's pretty relevant because sweets are definitely my Achilles heel. And there, if I take my wallet to work, well, there's a vending machine there with a lot of choices. So I leave my wallet at home. I need to, otherwise I am a weak-willed man. But if I have it on me, it's like that. It's like I gotta constantly tell myself, no, you don't need that. It's not a good idea. Don't give in to your temporary urge. You're better than that. Like, it's something you have to constantly remind yourself of. Because it's so easy not to lean on that defense, not to try to resist your urges. It's easier just to give in, because that's the compulsion. That's the tyranny of the immediate. Satisfy your immediate urge. Don't think about the future. The idea of eternal vigilance. That's like maintaining your character as long as possible, even up to your death. Is your character worthy of dying for? Well, maybe. What are you modeling your character after? That's a good question, too. In my mind, the life of a lamb is no less precious than that of a human being. Well, I do disagree on that one. If anything, because just the idea of consciousness itself and the human ability to violate our nature using the intellect, or even throwing away the intellect, if you want to get specific to it, puts us on at least a different plane than the animal. Because a lamb will act like a lamb. My cat will act like a feline. He won't just switch and become a dog. He won't violate his nature. But humans can kind of do whatever we want. We have that liberty. So in my mind, that's kind of how we are. I think the Judeo-Christian worldview explains that a bit better. He does talk about drugs a little bit in here, and I'd have to agree with him here, especially with the whole, if you know the history of how drugs came to be, the idea of where you take one thing and all your problems are gone. As if the seasons, the time of day, your diet have no effect whatsoever, and taking things like one thing and then another thing to help the body change and react, as if it's just so simple. You do one thing and then everything is cured, even though it's a complicated disease or virus. He says 999 cases out of 1,000 can be brought round by means of well-regulated diet. And I believe that. He is involved in earth treatment as well, and he even calls his own treatment quackery, which is kind of funny. But I believe that. That's something, that's life change, right? Diet is life change. And that's commitment. That takes a lot of time. You can't just take a pill and say, boom, I'm going to be skinny. Well, I guess you could. But the ramifications of like liposuction and just butchering the body, those aren't good. They aren't natural. Your body will not expect that. The flesh will not expect that, as it probably shouldn't. To slight a single human being is to slight those divine powers, and thus to harm not only that being, but with him the whole world. That's kind of has a karmic ring to it. But at the same time, that is kind of true. If you cut someone off in traffic and give them the finger, well, how many people is that person going to interact with before they get to their job? So not only are you burning with anger, because that will make you a little angry, or at least not agreeable, then you just messed up someone else's day, and who knows if they'll cut somebody off, and then they'll go to their workplace, and how many people will they affect? It's a rippling effect, but that's also karma as it exists. If you offend somebody, it's going to have a rippling effect on reality. That's just how it is. And it is divine in a sense, because it's like a power that passes through people without like any contact. Just like the meaning of it is passed. But it's not a good meaning. It's not one that helps. It's one that rather hinders communication. To allow a man to believe a thing which one has not fully verified is to compromise truth. Now that's on par with, he would not take cases to defend or to prosecute or anything unless the client was truthful with them and it was a cause he agreed in. Because if he had to argue a lie, as if someone made a false claim or something like that, eventually that lie will be found out, and he always was on the side of truth. I think that's quite noble. And it also gives you better understanding. If you really want to examine something specifically, you have to see what it's made of, especially when it comes to the true and false realm. And this is he says something in here it's actually a encouragement I've given to a couple of my friends at work and otherwise. He says, if poverty is a bar, poor man can never marry. And I agree. If something is worth doing, it should be done regardless of the money. Right? Like if you want to save up money to have a wedding, well, you better do it quick, or just have it. So that way you pledge in marriage. That's exactly what he's talking about. Some things are worth more than money. obviously, life itself, right? And to propagate the species, to stay with your mate, husband and wife. Nothing is more statistically proven to make society flourish. It is the bedrock of society. Mothers, fathers, children. That's how that works. When you step outside those bounds and with the no-fault divorce thing and everything else, then you're just messing with the literal structure of a country. The family unit. Here's another off comment he makes about man versus animal, at least as far as I can tell. The brute by nature knows no self-restraint. Man is man because he is capable of, and only insofar as he exercises self-restraint. So that's like violating your nature in the negative sense, but for a positive outcome. Like for men, right, in culture, we are held back from just taking any female we want. That's obviously an option, but culture will hold you accountable if you try to do that. So therefore you don't do it. And we try to teach our youth that that's what you do not do. If anything, because you don't see it practiced, first off, and, we have laws that go against that kind of stuff as well. Well, you practice self-restraint, so that way you're pulled back from the impulses. The tyranny of the immediate that will just pull you and put you under its spell. There's an intimate connection between mind and body, and the carnal mind always lusts for delicacies and luxuries. The case he was trying to make here is the idea of a simple life that comes along with restraining yourself from maybe your maximum wealthy potential, just so you don't let that consume you. A devotee of truth may not do anything in deference to convention. He must always hold himself open to correction, and whenever he discovers himself to be wrong, he must confess it at all costs and atone for it. And this is this gentleman's life to a T. We are not immortal or infinite, but we can strive to be such. We can at least strive after it. Maybe not to be that. Like earlier he said he wants to be sinless. Good luck with that. And even to his death, he was not able to hit that, at least not to his satisfaction. But if your finitude is pointed out, especially if it's a conviction you've held for a very long time, if you don't let yourself be corrected, then you're no longer becoming, well, like Christ said, like a child. To enter the kingdom of heaven, you must be as a child. Children always ask questions. They need correction, and they need to listen to those who have gone before and have a better outlook on life, so that way they can age and mature properly. In regards to idols, when a symbol is made up into a fetish and an instrument of proving the superiority of one's religion over the others, it is fit only to be discarded. I agree. A well-lived life will be examined, and the life, the character, the story is what will speak for the person's personal aim. Not a symbol, not a book, not a group of books, but rather the idea within them. Right? Not what a person accomplished in their lifetime, although that is significant, but rather what their aim was, what they were continuing after, and the result of that, the result of their pursuit, things happened in their life which are just etched and scarred into history. So this book is 420 pages long, and he eventually stops because he even says, I'm not compelled to go further with my autobiography because my life has become so public, you can go just read about it as it is. But I'm going to read the last two paragraphs here because he takes an interesting turn. At least I think so. It's more Buddhist than it is karmic. But at the same time, the Buddhism is kind of ingrained into the karmic system. And he does appeal to the spirit of truth constantly. He says, but the path of self-purification is hard and steep. To attain to perfect purity, one has to become absolutely passion-free in thought, speech, and action. Is that the passion for one's country as well? Well, maybe not. To rise above the opposing currents of love and hatred, attachment and repulsion, I know I have not in me as yet the triple purity, in spite of constant ceaseless strivings for it. That is why the world's praise fails to move me. Indeed, it very often stings me. To conquer the subtle passions seems to me to be harder far than the physical conquest of the world by the force of arms. Isn't that the truth? Ever since my return to India, I have had experiences of the dormant passions lying hidden within me. The knowledge of them has made me feel humiliated, though not defeated. The experiences and experiments have sustained me and given me great joy, but I know that I have still before me a difficult path to traverse, and must reduce myself to zero. So long as man does not of his own free will put himself last among his fellow creatures, there is no salvation for him. Ahimsa is the farthest limit of humility. That's treating all life as sacred, like the cow and the human are on the same plane. In bidding farewell to the reader, for the time being at any rate, I ask him to join with me in prayer to the God of truth, that he may grant me the boon of ahimsa in mind, word, and deed. This whole philosophy is replete with Christian literature, and that the book is very well written in English, very, very awesomely learned man. So I gleaned a lot out of this, especially as like a political figure who held to his views as he danced around the political stream. So what can we take away from that? Well, we can take away Gandhi several times was put quite low, but he did not sacrifice his character. But oftentimes he was asked to, especially in times of like illness. But the thing that he was always pursuing in the hero story, again, that the cycle of starting out in the normal, jumping into the unknown. He willfully went to the unknown several times. He was armed with education, and he was armed with honoring the spirit of truth. So oftentimes he was put into foreign lands, and he was really patriotic as far as the culture went, especially in Africa. He wanted the Indians to be better represented, and he also saw the hygienic issues they were having, and he wanted his Indian people to be better as well. And that vision, that truth, as far as I can tell, kept him pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So if you don't have, when you go down that dark path into the unknown, and you might hit hell when you're down there, if you are not holding on to things of this world that pull on your passions and your flesh, your conveniences, your affluence, then your trip back up, back to your normal character, will be that much more easy. And I think he kind of embodies the blessed or the pure of heart, because he did not strive for a very lavish lifestyle. If you want to continue with me on this journey, check out this video that YouTube recommends up here, and we can see how much further we can take the hero story.